President Marcos has recently signed a landmark law allowing authorities to act early based on forecasts and risk assessments. The Declaration of State of Imminent Disaster Act allows the president or local executives to release funds before disasters strike, shifting from a reactive to a proactive risk-informed approach. The bill was developed by the Office of the Civil Defense with technical support from the UN World Food Program and other partners. WFP Philippines Representative and Country Director Regis Chapman says that with an average of 20 typhoons each year, the law is expected to save lives and reduce costs of emergency responses. And joining us live in the studio is Regis Chapman himself. Welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, the timing could not be more perfect to have you here on the program because we're about to be hit by a really strong typhoon. So tell us how this Imminent Disaster Act works.
Right, so we refer to it also as the Anticipatory Action Act. It's maybe an easier way to say it, or AA Act. And effectively, as you mentioned, what anticipatory action does is it helps to reduce the impacts of forecasted hazard. So it uses early warning systems, early warning information in order to trigger specific and timely actions and importantly, releasing predetermined financing. Now that in turn allows communities to be able to better prepare and to protect their lives and livelihoods, their assets, and their food security, amongst other things.
The measure identifies certain areas around the country. Why is that necessary?
Yeah. So WFP and other partners are working with OCD, with DSWD, with a number of other government entities at the national and local levels to really strengthen some of the disaster management systems to be able to apply some of these anticipatory actions.
So these are like regional centers?
Well, so
like Habonga in Agusan del Sur, Legazpi in Albay.
Yep. So it's based on level of vulnerability. So we know the eastern
seaboard. So you identified these areas as the most vulnerable.
Well, these are priority areas because of their exposure, particularly to storms. So as we're seeing now, as we saw last year with a number of typhoons over 25 days, there are areas that are more traditionally impacted by typhoons. But it's not only for typhoons. There are other shocks. There's droughts. There's earthquakes. Anything that has a degree of predictability, anticipatory action can support. But I think what's important to note is this isn't really new in a way.
True.
Government does this. So you mentioned in an earlier segment, closing of schools. That's anticipatory action. DSWD, pre-positioning family food packs around the country.
Warning of storm surges.
Preemptive evacuation.
Exactly, opening shelters. Now what makes this different is this is actually, the Philippines is breaking new ground here. This law institutionalizes AA. This is a first of its kind anywhere in the world. And so while governments around the world take anticipatory action, what's often missing is some of the last mile delivery. So that predetermined financing is key. But what this law will also help to do is not only to open the shelters and to close schools or close government offices, but it can also allow a degree of assistance before a disaster hits. As we saw last year with some of the typhoons and the significant flooding that takes place afterwards, accessing impacted communities can be difficult. Trucks can't get through, roads that are inundated. So by having some of that assistance go to the most vulnerable before an event happens is one of the game-changing aspects.
Regis, help us picture how this looks like on the ground. Like what changes are we going to see? Is it like, for example, before, you know, after the storm, when the storm leaves, we see the most damaged areas and then they have to request for like an emergency or state of calamity fund. Is that now going to be a thing of the past because they get the funds up front, or is it a completely different thing?
It's complementary. So I, you know, again, as I mentioned, this can help to reduce the impacts, but it doesn't stop those impacts, right? So a vulnerable household living in substandard housing materials, that house with a significant storm is still going to be damaged, right? But what the anticipatory action can allow that household to do is get out of harm's way or to move their assets. So let's say they're fisher folk on the coastline. They can move their boat out of harm's way, so that the impact is not for many, many months to come, but perhaps a shorter period. They're able to reactivate their livelihood.
So it's kind of like institutionalizing some of the best
I was about to
practices.
say.
Yeah,
And-
already on
and
the
this
ground.
is the key, and this is where this law is different. It institutionalizes AA in a very different way. Now, there's still a lot of work ahead. This will not change. So with CO Pong coming, you know, again, a lot of this depends on the work that's happening with Pagasa to look at the early warning systems, the wind signals, what triggers different actions. So OCD is leading the charge on this, and the next step is really developing some of the rules and regulations of how you actually implement the AA law or the state of imminent disaster. And so I think where partners like the World Food Program, other UN agencies, NGOs around the country, AA has been pioneered in many ways in the Philippines, but I think what the bill does is really help to take those smaller case studies and institutionalize it so that it becomes, you know, similar to the family food packs that everyone sees, you know, being distributed in the onset of an emergency.
Becomes almost second nature.
It becomes almost second nature.
Yeah.
There's a long road ahead. This has been a long road to get us here. It's been a very long road, and but really it's fantastic to see this progress and really again the leadership of the government of the
Well,
Philippines.
Regis, tell us about your experience in pilot areas like Bicol, Caraga, and Eastern Visayas. What was the impact, the immediate impact of that on areas?
Yeah, so we have, as WFP in the UN system, we've been working on, for the past several years, a pilot anticipatory action program that delivers cash and other assistance before an impact occurs. Now, as I mentioned earlier, AA has a set of guidelines that are based on triggers when certain conditions are met. So it's not just in any given case we see that it's going to rain, so we start giving out stuff, right, or assisting people. So really certain thresholds need to be met. Now, in the years of these pilots, we haven't seen those thresholds met as of yet. The slight exception was last year with the series of storms that we saw. One that came in at the end, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but that hit Catanduanes and several other areas. Technically could have triggered certain LGUs, but the way that the modeling was developed, it didn't trigger because all the conditions weren't met. So this has been also a learning experience. But what that did allow us to do was respond a lot quicker. And now one of the things that the World Food Program has been doing is working with the DSWD to piggyback on the 4Ps program. So again, the 4Ps program is a well-established program. It's, I think, the second largest social protection program anywhere in the world. It targets the most vulnerable people within a community. And we know this from experience in the Philippines and around the world, that the people who are most impacted when storms and other events hit are the poorest and most vulnerable. So rather than waiting and going out and assessing and figuring out who should get exactly what, being able to respond quickly and get cash in the hands of impacted populations is so critical to helping them get back on their feet. More nuanced and targeting program can follow that, but what we were able to do because of all those investments in anticipatory action last year is within days after first Christine hit, we were able to start getting cash out to 4Ps beneficiaries in partnership with DSWD.
So you hope other countries vulnerable like the Philippines will have a similar AA law.
Indeed, and I think the idea is to shift from entities like WFP and NGOs doing this and rather have it be institutionalized so that it becomes, as you said, almost second nature. We see a major storm coming and we know the impacts when we see the real big ones coming. So rather than waiting to assess and assist afterwards, already providing some of that initial support. When we see the Pagasa alerts and the wind signals, it comes with instructions for people in harm's way. Leave, evacuate, board up your windows or stock up on food and water. You and I are able to do that, but the poorest of the poor can't necessarily do that. So this can help facilitate.
Becoming more aware.
Yeah.
Time was when, they have forced evacuation, but now, I guess because of the experience that typhoons have become worse and worse every year because of climate change. And so people have become more cognizant. Don't you think?
Yeah, less complacent, and they're more aware.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they have to sort of experience like the worst of it, and they don't want to repeat it.
I've worked in a lot of countries around the world that are exposed to natural hazards, and I think, you know, oftentimes when you don't have that lived experience, yes, it goes sort of on the back burner, right? I mean, we talk about the big one in Manila. It's easier to prepare for the next typhoon coming through because we know that will happen in a couple of days. It's harder to prepare for something that's a bit more distance from your lived experience, for sure.
So we're now practicing this law as we speak.
We are.
We are, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for
That
having me.
was Regis Chapman, who is the head of the country head in the Philippines of the World Food Program.